Today I'm going to talk about my family made fun of me for 20 years, and then showed up at our house that I bought after a $400 million settlement. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end, and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell, so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I was never really part of the family. I was more like a shadow that moved through the house, quiet and barely noticed. My name is Emma, and I'm 25 now. But this story begins long before I learned how to disappear. My dad remarried when I was barely a year old. His new wife, Diane, made it clear from the beginning that I was not welcome. I don't remember my mother. She died when I was a baby, but I learned quickly not to ask about her. Diane had 2 sons from a previous relationship, Corey and Josh. They were the shining stars of the family. Blonde, loud, athletic, everything I wasn't. From the age of 5, I understood that love in that house came with terms and conditions, and I didn't qualify. Birthdays passed with barely a nod. At Christmas, I got socks while Corey got a gaming console. I remember once, when I was 7, I made a drawing at school of our family. Diane looked at it and laughed. "You made me too fat. Maybe next time, draw your real family." By the time I was 12, the boys called me the orphan. Diane never corrected them. My dad, he stopped saying much at all. Maybe it was easier for him that way. I started staying out late. Not because I was rebellious, but because the library felt more like home than our living room. I'd sit between the aisles reading about other worlds, other lives. Anything that wasn't mine. Then came the breaking point. At 14, I was accepted into a summer science program at a local university. It was a big deal. Only 3 students from my school got in. I ran home with the acceptance letter in hand, heart pounding. I found Diane in the kitchen. She looked at the letter, skimmed it, and said, "We're not paying for that. Be realistic, Emma. You're not going to be some genius or whatever." I remember just standing there, letter in hand, face burning. My dad walked in, saw what was happening, and said nothing. Just turned around and left the room. That night, I packed a small bag and left. I ended up staying with a neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, a retired nurse who had always been kind to me. She let me sleep in her spare room, and gave me tea like I was someone worth caring for. I never went back home. Social services got involved, and to my surprise, Diane and my father agreed to give up custody without much fight. Maybe they were relieved. Maybe it was just easier to let me go. I got placed in a group home for a year, then eventually with a foster family, who mostly left me alone. Which was fine. I didn't need love. I needed space. I worked every job I could find. Waitressing, cleaning offices at night, babysitting. At 16, I started taking online coding courses. I used the computers at the local library and watched endless tutorials until I could build my own apps. That's how I met Dean. Dean was a freelance programmer who came into the cafe I worked at every morning. He noticed me scribbling code on napkins during breaks. One day, he asked to see what I was working on. He was impressed. 3 months later, I was working part-time for him, debugging code and managing small client tasks. By 19, I was his full-time partner. By 21, he handed me the reins when he decided to retire and move to Greece. By 25, I closed a $400 million deal with a global software firm for an app we built. It should have felt like victory. It should have been the moment where everything changed. But then they came back. First, it was a Facebook message from Corey. Just a casual, "Hey, heard you're doing well. Proud of you, sis. We should catch up." Then a voicemail from Diane. Her voice syrupy sweet, like she hadn't once told me I was an ungrateful mistake. "Emma, honey, we're just so thrilled for you. Your father and I would love to come see you. Reconnect. You have such a beautiful house. We've seen the pictures online. We could have a family weekend. Like old times." Old times? I listened to that message 3 times. And then I deleted it. But something in me, something broken but not dead, needed to see how far they'd go. So I replied, "Sure. Come by next weekend." And I waited. They had no idea what was waiting for them behind the gates. They showed up in 2 cars. Diane was wearing a floral dress too tight for comfort, with her hair curled like it was 1998 again. Corey pulled up behind her in a rented SUV, wearing designer sunglasses and holding a Starbucks like he'd just come from a photo shoot. Josh wasn't there. He was probably still too proud or too ashamed. Either way, I was grateful. I stood at the top of the driveway, watching them step out like they owned the place. Like they were arriving for a family reunion, not a reckoning. Diane gave me a hug without asking. Her perfume was the same, cloying and sharp. Emma, look at this house, sweetheart. I told your father you were always destined for big things. Didn't I say that, Corey? Corey laughed and nodded, looking around. This place is insane. Is that a pool house back there? Damn. You made it big, Em. They walked in without waiting for me. I let them. They roamed the house like tourists. Diane touched everything. Photo frames, vases, even the edge of my grand piano. She kept making little noises like she was proud. Corey opened the fridge like it was his own, grabbed a bottled water, and collapsed on my white couch with his shoes still on. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Your father wanted to come, Diane said, adjusting a throw pillow like it mattered. But he's been under the weather lately. Maybe next time. Next time? They acted like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't left me to rot. Like they hadn't pretended I didn't exist for a decade. Diane wandered into the kitchen. You know, she said, her voice too casual. With a house like this, you must be thinking about settling down soon. Maybe having a family of your own. I stared at her. She smiled like we were sharing a secret. And of course, family is everything, isn't it? Blood ties, those never go away. I think that was the moment I realized what they were really here for. Not nostalgia. Not guilt. Not even forgiveness. They wanted in. They wanted access. I didn't give them a tour. They gave it to themselves. Diane took the master bedroom for a nap. Just for a bit, dear, my back's killing me. And Corey asked if he could use the hot tub. I didn't answer. He went anyway. I sat at the kitchen island and watched the surveillance cameras on my phone. Every room. Every movement. Their casual entitlement played out in silent black and white. That evening I cooked dinner. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed one more scene. One more piece. We sat at the long table in the dining room. I served pasta and salad. Diane poured herself a third glass of wine before we even started eating. So, she began, smiling with wine-stained teeth. This place really could be great for holidays. We were thinking Thanksgiving. We could host your cousins, your Aunt Jean. She's dying to see you again. Corey nodded. Yeah, this place has room for everyone. And you've got the money, so it's not like it'd be a big deal, right? I looked down at my plate, still untouched. Then I looked up. You think this is your house? They both froze. Diane laughed nervously. No, of course not, we just meant. Because the way you've been acting, it's like you think you're entitled to it. Like you think you're entitled to me. Corey raised his hands. Hey, we're just trying to reconnect. No need to be hostile. I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I pulled out a small stack of printed photos, grainy stills from old camcorders and phones. Me sitting alone at birthdays. Me cleaning the kitchen while they opened gifts. Me standing outside the school auditorium, while everyone else took family pictures. I laid them out in front of them. Reconnect with that. Diane's face changed. Her smile evaporated. Corey looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. This house, I said slowly, was built brick by brick from nights you left me hungry. From every time you called me a mistake. From every door you closed in my face. I let the silence drag. Diane looked like she wanted to say something. I didn't let her. You'll stay the night. Then tomorrow morning you'll leave. And you won't come back. Not without an invitation. I left the table. Went upstairs. Locked my door. The next morning they were gone. So were 3 bottles of wine. And a gold bracelet that had belonged to Mrs. Holloway. I didn't report it. I just replaced the locks. And then I called my lawyer. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications, so you don't miss the next story. The lawyer's name was Marian Collins. Sharp, discreet, and the kind of person who didn't blink when you asked for things that others would tiptoe around. I found her through a referral from one of Dean's old contacts. We met in her office, a sleek glass building downtown, where everything smelled like leather and quiet power. She listened, barely interrupting, as I laid everything out. The abandonment. The reappearance. The overnight visit. The missing bracelet. The entitlement. Marianne was efficient. You want distance and protection. We can do that. I nodded. I want clear legal boundaries. I don't want them using my name. I don't want them showing up again thinking they're entitled to anything. And I definitely don't want them trying to spin some narrative about us reconciling. She drafted a cease and desist that afternoon. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. It was clean, precise, and very hard to challenge. It stated, in polite but firm language, that I did not authorize any contact, use of my likeness, name, story, or image by any member of that household. It included trespassing provisions and consequences for any breach. She even suggested I consider installing a gate at the end of the property. Already scheduled, I said. For the next week, things were quiet. I poured myself into work. I walked through every room in the house and made adjustments, small things really. A new lamp here. Replacing the throw pillows. Repainting the guest room. It felt like I was cleansing the space of them. Then the text messages started. First from Corey. Really? A lawyer? You could have just said you needed time. That was cold, M. Then from Diane. We're heartbroken. We came in love. You're pushing away the only family you have. One day, you'll regret this. And finally, from a number I didn't recognize. You think you're too good for us now? Money doesn't erase blood. I changed my number the next morning. The quiet that followed was unnerving at first. Like waiting for a storm to circle back. But it didn't. At least not immediately. It gave me time to breathe. It was around that time that I started thinking about Mrs. Holloway again. The woman who took me in when no one else would. Her kindness had been quiet, steady, without condition. She used to say, people who love you right never need to say it all the time. You'll feel it in their presence. I went back to her old house, now owned by someone else. I stood across the street and just looked at it for a long while. I thought about knocking, introducing myself, saying, a woman who saved my life lived there. But I didn't. I just took a breath and left a bouquet of white lilies by the front gate. That night, I had a strange dream. I was sitting in that old spare room again, wrapped in one of her knitted blankets, while she made tea in the kitchen. I could hear her humming. I woke up crying. It made me realize something. I had spent so much time trying to be free from them that I forgot to fill that space with something better. Not people necessarily, but something real, something mine. So I started small. I adopted a dog, a scruffy, nervous little terrier mix named Cleo. She didn't trust me at first, but I didn't take it personally. I knew what that kind of fear felt like. I joined a local book club, quietly at first, just listening. Then one day I spoke up. People listened. No one rolled their eyes or cut me off. I started walking every morning, no headphones, no distractions. Just me and Cleo and the road. For the first time in my life, I could hear myself think, without the background noise of who I was supposed to be. But then one Thursday afternoon Marianne called. Emma, she said, her voice calm but clipped. I think you need to see something. She sent a link. A local lifestyle blog had posted a story titled, A Strange Daughter of Tech Mogul Reunites with Family in Stunning Estate Visit. Below it was a photo taken from a distance, Corey and Diane in front of my house. Smiling, holding hands. The caption read, Sources say the family is working on healing old wounds. I stared at the screen, my stomach turning. I hadn't said a word to anyone. They had staged it. Lied. Used my house, my name, my story. I felt my hands shake. Cleo looked up from her spot on the rug, sensing the shift. It wasn't over. The next morning, the same lifestyle blog updated their story with a new headline. A strange brother makes peaceful visit to tech mogul's home. There was the selfie. My gate in the background. Marianne was livid. I was numb. I changed my routines. Took new walking routes. Canceled my gym membership. I hired private security. Not for protection but for my peace. I didn't want to feel watched, or worse followed. And slowly, the noise began to die down. The story lost steam. No follow-ups. The bloggers moved on to something else. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Like every piece of myself I had reclaimed was now bruised from being dragged back into their orbit. One night, Cleo started barking at the front door. I checked the cameras. Nothing. Still I stayed up. Couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt like a warning. That's when I decided something had to change. Not for safety, but for myself. I called Marianne the next day. I want to sell the house. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes. I want a clean slate. Somewhere they've never touched. Somewhere I don't have to scrub their fingerprints off my memories. She handled it. Within 3 weeks, the house was on a private listing. And in less than 2 months it was sold. I didn't tell anyone where I was moving. Not even the few acquaintances I had in town. I kept it quiet. Deliberate. Private. The new place was smaller, tucked in the hills, with no obvious address. A modest gate. A long gravel driveway. A view of the lake. No luxury. Just peace. I didn't post about it. I didn't celebrate. I unpacked slowly. Set up one room at a time. Every object I placed felt like planting a flag. This is mine. This space is mine. The last thing I unpacked was a small box from Mrs. Holloway's house. Inside was the bracelet. The real one. I had moved it to the safe months ago just in case. The one Diane took was a fake. I smiled to myself. I hadn't forgotten. I had just waited. And then I sat down and wrote letters. Not to them. Not to anyone who would read them. Just for me. One for Diane. One for Corey. One for my father. Each one ended the same way. You don't get to rewrite the past. I lived it. And I remember everything. I burned them in the fireplace that night. Cleo sat next to me, her head on my knee, as the ashes curled into the air. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A letter. Handwritten in slanted cursive. The kind people don't use anymore. No return address. Just my name. Clean and centered on a cream-colored envelope. It was from my father. I sat on the porch with Cleo at my feet, the sun warming the wooden steps. I held the envelope in my hand for a long time, debating whether it was worth opening. Part of me didn't want to give him the space in my mind. Another part needed to know what he had to say. The letter was short. Emma, I know I don't deserve your time. I know I wasn't the father I should have been. I should have spoken up more. I should have protected you. And I didn't. I failed you. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see all of it. I hope you've built a life far away from us. And I hope you're happy. I wish I had been braver. Dad. I read it twice. Then a third time. It was the first time I had ever heard anything close to an apology from him. It didn't change what he did, or didn't do. But it was the first message from my past that didn't try to manipulate or twist the truth. It simply acknowledged it. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. Days passed. The leaves started changing color. And my walks with Cleo became cooler, quieter. I started to breathe differently. Slower. Easier. As if the absence of noise had created space I didn't know I needed. Then one evening, I got an unexpected email. Not from any of them. But from someone who used to live down the street when I was a kid. Mrs. Fernandez. She had found me through a mutual contact, and wrote to say she remembered me. That she had always wondered what happened after I left. She mentioned how her son, now in his 30s, had seen my name online and told her I made it. But that's not what stood out. What stood out was her saying this. I remember once you were about 8 or 9. It was raining. And you were sitting alone on the curb with your backpack soaked. I asked if you wanted to come inside. You said, no thank you. I'm used to it. That moment broke my heart. I never forgot. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I remembered it clearly, but because I didn't. There were so many moments like that. Small cuts that became a kind of emotional erosion over time. I thanked her for the message, and I told her something I hadn't admitted to anyone before. I made it. But not because of them. In spite of them. It was the truth. That week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I bought a plane ticket. Not to travel far. Just to the city where Mrs. Holloway was buried. I hadn't visited since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers. I sat beside her grave for an hour, telling her everything. About the house, the sale, Cleo, the fake bracelet, the blog posts, the restraining orders, and the letter from my father. I told her I missed her. And I told her thank you for being the first person who ever made me feel wanted. On the way back to the airport, I stopped by a diner, a small family-run place. A waitress in her 20s looked stressed, juggling orders while the manager barked from the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she poured coffee. I left her a $500 tip. It wasn't about the money. It was about what a small act of kindness can do when someone's just trying to survive. Back home, I printed a photo of Mrs. Holloway and put it above my desk. No frame, just taped to the wall. A quiet reminder. I had spent most of my life trying to forget where I came from. Now I was learning how to remember it without pain. A year passed. No more blog posts. No surprise visits. No letters. I stayed in the hills, where life moved slower. I walked Cleo through the trails every morning, watched the light shift through the trees. I spent my days building a small software consultancy. Nothing major, just me and a few contractors. It paid the bills and kept me grounded. I didn't want headlines anymore. I wanted normal. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from Marianne. "It's your father," she said. "He passed away last night." I didn't speak. I just let the silence sit there. She cleared her throat. "You were listed in the will. There's a letter and some assets. You're under no obligation, but I wanted to let you know." I told her I'd think about it. I hung up. Then I sat with Cleo by the window, watching her ears twitch at every sound. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. I waited a week before asking Marianne to send the letter. It was handwritten like the first one. Neater this time. Longer. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There's no way to make up for what I didn't do. I can only try to explain. I was afraid." Diane was louder. Stronger. I let her set the rules. I let her tell me who you were. But I knew better. I always knew you were the smartest person in that house. I just didn't have the strength to protect you. I failed you. Over and over. And I know I lost the right to ask for forgiveness. But I hope one day, you'll believe that I saw you. Even when I pretended not to. Everything I left for you is yours alone. No one else knows. I'm sorry, Dad. There was a key in the envelope. No label. Just a small brass key taped to the bottom of the page. Marian gave me the rest of the details. It was a storage unit, paid for years in advance. Hidden away in a city I hadn't set foot in since I was 15. I drove there on a rainy Thursday, not sure what I was expecting. Maybe boxes of junk. Maybe a trap. Maybe nothing at all. What I found instead was a dusty room filled with silence. A few boxes, sealed and labeled in shaky handwriting. One was marked, Emma's school. Inside, I found every school photo I didn't know he kept. Every drawing I'd made. Report cards. Even the acceptance letter to that science program Diane had ripped in half. Another box held a worn-out video camera. Tapes. I didn't have the heart to watch them yet. The last box was labeled, letters. They were all addressed to me. Dozens of them. Written over years. None ever sent. Pages and pages of apologies, questions, memories. He had written to me all along. He just never found the courage to let me read them. I sat there, surrounded by cardboard and grief that wasn't clean. It wasn't cinematic. It was messy, conflicted, human. I didn't cry. But when I left, I took every box with me. Back home. I put them in the attic. Not to hide but to hold. For when I was ready. Weeks passed. And for the first time, I found myself thinking of him. Not as a villain, not as a coward, but as a broken man who tried, in his own too late way, to see me. And that was enough. Not for reconciliation. Not for peace. But for closure. One afternoon, I stood outside with Cleo, the wind pulling at my sleeves. I looked at the lake. At the trees. At the life I built with my own hands. There was no family to fight off now. No one left trying to claim pieces of me. Just me. Standing whole. I didn't get justice in the traditional sense. No courtroom. No revenge. But I got my life back. And in the end, that was more powerful than anything they could have taken from me. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell, and send it to someone you think will also like it.